Welcome to Solosaurus, a podcast about one-player board and card games. My name is Brandon Waite.
And my name is Carter Mackey.
And this is episode 59, where we are talking about our top 10 introductory solo games. So this is something that is different for us. If you are a longtime listener of the show, you'll know almost all of our episodes are dedicated to reviewing a single game in depth. And we started the show for that purpose, and we enjoy doing those more than anything else. But every now and then we want to do a top 10 list just to help people find games that are a good fit for them. And this particular episode, we decided to do introductory solo games because we were recently interviewed for an article on Atlas Obscura. If you've not heard of Atlas Obscura, it's a large website dedicated to food and travel and culture. And they wanted to do an episode on solo games as a way to endure the quarantine during the pandemic. And I mean, I've been playing a lot of solo games during the pandemic.
Yeah.
I mean, we always play a lot of solo games.
Right.
Because we do this show. But they're right. It is a great way to spend time, especially if you're sick of screens. You know, a lot of people now are working from home using Zoom. Personally, I am absolutely sick of Zoom and all things like electronic meeting at this point.
It's nice to have a break from the computer because, I mean, we're on our devices a lot in general, but it's been a lot with the quarantine.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And probably even if you aren't as absorbed in that for your work, for instance, almost all of us spend probably too much time watching television or playing video games or something like that. And if you want to try something different, solo games are a thing that maybe you didn't know about until you read this article or stumbled on this show. A lot of us find our way to one-player board games because we actually enjoyed playing board games, maybe more than we thought we would when we first got into the hobby. And turns out it's hard to get people together and hard to get people interested in the same games that you like.
Right.
And then, you know, one day you realize, hey, this game can be played one player. And so you give it a shot, and turns out there's a whole rabbit hole to fall down. And some of us like it enough that it's like the main way that we play games. That's, for me, I play a lot of board games. That's my primary form of entertainment. And I would play with other people more, but life gets in the way, and I've found that I just also really love playing one player. If you're new to the show, I'm Brandon, and that's my situation. I primarily play board games solo. For Carter, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's more of a concession. I enjoy solo board games, but it's not a thing that is always my first choice as far as entertainment goes. It's just more of, as life has changed and shifted, it's harder for people to get together, get those game nights going. And so, yeah, it is a way to bridge the gap to still sit down and play a board game, even when you can't get other people together.
Yeah, and whether you're coming at this as somebody who's interested in maybe falling down the rabbit hole, or you're somebody who's just sick of watching TV at this point or really missing your game group and wanting to explore this a little bit, this list that we're putting together today has both groups of people in mind. We have a different version of introductory solo games than other people do.
Right. This isn't a list that's all about just lowest common denominator, the easiest, just simplest type of games.
No, definitely not. We have a whole set of criteria that we decided to look at. I mean, we wanted variety of mechanics, for one thing. If you're new to board games in general, there are way more types of games out there than just the kind of roll a die and see how many spaces you move kind of mechanics. There are a whole range of them. And so we wanted to cover a wide variety of those and a wide variety of themes. Thankfully, there are now way more themes available to you than just choosing to play a monopolizing business owner.
Absolutely. I mean, because that's so much of the game is like, is it enjoyable to look at, to kind of imagine? Just, you want it to be something that is fun.
Exactly. And beyond those things, we also wanted to get a wide variety of playtimes and complexity. You know, a lot of people are scared off by rules complexity, and I get that, especially if you're new to the hobby. It can be very off-putting to read a longer rule book. So we do definitely include several games on this list that are on the low complexity end. But on the other hand, rules complexity is not the only factor to consider when you're trying to think about what helps people to get into a game. I think variety is important even in this area because it can help you to get a better sense of what modern board games can do and be, especially for solo play. If you only ever play low complexity games, you don't really get a good feel for what solo gaming can be, right? Playing a game of solitaire, which is probably the way that most of us have started out playing one-player games. It's not that it's not enjoyable, right? But it's not something that leaves you thinking about it for very long afterward either. It doesn't absorb you in the same way. It's just kind of a good way to pass the time, right? A time filler. There are games like that on this list, But we also wanted to include some games that are a little more complex and that do suck you in more, because for some people, that's going to be a better entry point, frankly, than some of those lighter games.
Yeah, I think for me now is I've only gotten into lighter games as I've been in the board gaming hobby for longer, because I want those smaller games to kind of fill things. But yeah, when I first got into it, it's like I wanted big, meaty games to sink my teeth into.
And we recognize that people are going to be coming at this from both sides. So if you are looking for your first solo game, but you want it to last you a long time and to absorb your thinking, we've got those. If you want a game that just gets you into it and fills the time, that's fine too. So just a heads up, this list is going to be a pretty good mix of all those things. And this is not a traditional kind of top 10 list. If you listen to other lists of this type on YouTube or other podcasts, this isn't a ranked list in the sense that number 10 is our least favorite game on the list and number 1 is our most favorite. We actually ranked these according to complexity. So if you're wondering, I'm looking mostly just for lighter games or I'm looking mostly for heavier games, you can just know that as we approach number 1 on the list, we're going to start at number 10 with the lightest one here and work our way up to the more complex ones. All right, well then before we jump into the list, we'll just say very quickly that this episode is sponsored by Stone Valley Games. If you are looking for the next solo game in your collection, stonevalleygames.com is an excellent place to go, especially if you are a listener who is based in the United States. This store is as well. They have great prices on games. And if you happen to have friends or family who are in the U.S. military who are serving abroad, they do ship for free to active military serving in other countries. So if you are looking for your next game, check out stonevalleygames.com. All right, let's get right into the list. And we're going to start the list with number 10, which is Welcome To from Deepwater Games. Welcome To is a very light, breezy, roll and write game about creating a neighborhood, like your own little suburb of a larger city. So you are going to get these printed sheets of paper that have little houses pictured on them, and over the course of the game you're going to be filling in those houses with different numbers, trying to create rows of houses that have numbers in ascending order, which is much trickier than it sounds. And you're also trying to build fences and make your fences and plots of land worth more and more points over the course of the game. It's a very light, breezy kind of experience with an excellent, simple beat-your-own-score mechanism for solo play, where you just play and try to do as well as you can and see if you can beat your high score the next time.
Yeah, Welcome To. It's a great roll and write game that doesn't really have any rolling in it whatsoever, but you are flipping cards and then writing on a piece of paper.
Yeah, if you're not familiar with the term roll and write, basically it describes a whole family of games that have actually existed for a long time. Think Yahtzee, for instance. If you've ever played Yahtzee, it's about rolling dice and writing numbers on a piece of paper, right? Trying to get a better score, get sets of dice or whatever. And in the last couple of years, there's just been a ton of these kind of games out there. And a lot of them are very good, and a lot of them are playable solo. But Welcome To is a really great example of a game that has some really good, interesting choices to make, while also being just an extremely light, fun, fast game to play solo.
Yeah, I feel like it's just the right amount of time that you're investing in it. And yeah, it's enjoyable. You have to think, but it's not going to melt your brain down. Yeah, I don't know. It's just an enjoyable little game.
And can be played with a large group of people. That's one of the things about this game in particular that's really interesting. On the box, it says it can be played with 1 to 99 people. And that's because that's how many sheets of paper there are in the game. Mm-hmm. You actually can play this game with a huge crowd of people all at once. And it takes about the same amount of time. So if you're looking for a game that you can play solo or bring out at family game night, check out our number 10, Welcome To. Our number 9 game is another simple, small game, but this time a significant step up in terms of the puzzly nature of it, in my opinion anyway, and that is Sprawlopolis from Button Shy Games.
No, I haven't gotten a chance to play this game yet.
This is a tiny little wallet-sized game from a company called Button Shy Games, and it is about building a city. Each card in this little wallet has a picture of some buildings of different colors and a stretch of road. And basically, you're going to be, every turn, looking at a couple of card options in your hand, laying one down, trying to connect roads, trying to build bigger neighborhoods, and trying to meet different goals for how you build your city, which can be found actually on the back of all of these cards. What's really impressive about this game to me is that it has an incredibly low barrier to entry. I mean, price-wise, it's very affordable. I think it's like $10 or $15 to get a copy of this. And then in terms of rules overhead, It's just a couple of tiny sheets of paper that explain the rules to you. And yet there is a lot of depth and replayability in this package. It is a fast, thinky, puzzly game. And we have not done a review for this one yet, but I really like it so far. And I think it definitely belongs on this list. And I know you haven't played it yet, but I think you would really like it. It has a small footprint, even in terms of like table space. You are laying out, I think, 18 cards maybe that make up the total of this game. And that does take up a little bit of space, but nothing like a normal, like full board game. And you really can just slip this thing into your back pocket. It is the size of a tiny, slim wallet, which I think is just super cool.
Yeah, it just seems for the size, it's not going to take up much space. You can store it away anywhere. You can put it in a drawer. But it seems like it is a good, hefty game from what I can tell and what you've described.
Yes, definitely. If you're looking for a fast, fun, portable, but also thinky game with some depth, check out our number 9, Sprawlopolis from Button Shy Games. Our number 8 game for this list is a classic solo game that is now several years old, and that is Friday from designer Friedman Fries and publisher Rio Grande Games. Now, this is the only other one that you haven't played.
Right. This is the one other game that I haven't played, but before I even considered playing solo games, I feel like I had heard about Friday.
Yeah, it is widely considered to be a solo classic. Most of the games on this list came out in 2017 or later. This game came out in 2011, so kind of before solo games really started to blow up. And it's a one-player only game, so like we mentioned, Welcome to plays 1 to 99 players. Sprawlopolis can be played with more than one, but it really should be just played with one. Friday was, I think, one of the first games to come out as part of this new wave of board games anyway, that says it's exclusively a one-player game.
Right.
Which is kind of a gamble for the publisher, honestly.
Yeah, at that time, that was what was surprising to me, is I'd heard about it, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll get Friday next. And then I saw that, oh no, you can only play this by yourself. And I was like, well, I'm not going to do that.
This was actually the first solo game that I ever played. My friend David Libby gave me a copy of this off of his shelf, and actually I think he listens to this show, so thank you, David. You started something. I took it home and played it and was surprised by how much I loved it because it comes in a very small box. And the artwork on the front of the box is very like Sunday morning comic strip kind of feel. It's very goofy and bright and colorful. And it just led me to believe that there probably wouldn't be anything of real substance in the box, but that is absolutely not true. It turns out this is a game about being Friday from the novel Robinson Crusoe. So your goal as Friday, who is never actually pictured in the game, is you have seen Robinson Crusoe wash ashore, and in this version of the story, Robinson is an idiot. He does not know how to survive. He is a dummy. He makes bad decisions, and you need to guide him to survival and just toughen him up before 2 pirate ships come to the island, which he's going to have to fight and survive if he wants to win. This is a great mix of pretty easy to learn rules. Not too bad, but a lot of really great decisions, a lot of push your luck. You're slowly trying to build up a deck of cards that get stronger and stronger over the course of the game, while also purging cards that represent Robinson's weaknesses. And that process of adding cards to your deck and purging weak cards from your deck is a mechanic in board games known as deck building. It's done in a pretty weird, sort of unique way here, but it is easily one of the most popular board game mechanics that exists. It has been for some time, and there's a reason for that. It feels very satisfying to get stronger over the course of the game and purge your weaknesses, and that's part of why I think this makes such a good solo game. You, as Friday, are coaching Robinson, and you can see him getting stronger.
Yeah. I know that is deck building, but it doesn't make me think of that.
It's definitely not a good example of deck building as a whole, as it's a pretty quirky take on it. But the spin that it adds really does work well for a solo game. Now, I will say this is not actually a game that I own anymore, but that's not because it's not good or it's gone down in my estimation or anything like that. It's actually because this game I have played to death. It was one of my very first games, but I had played it just dozens and dozens and dozens of times after that and really enjoyed it for a long time. And the only reason I really got rid of it is that I happen to notice there's also an app version, and I really like the app version because it saves me the shuffling. I don't have to set up anything at all. So if you want to test it out before you get the actual cards and everything, if you want to give it a test run or you think you might just enjoy the app more, check out the app. I think it's available on Google devices and on Apple. So that is our number 8, an excellent introductory solo game. Friday from Rio Grande Games. Our number 7 on this list is easily the most popular game of last year, and that is Wingspan from Stonemaier Games and designer Elizabeth Hargrave. And Wingspan is a game about building an aviary. It's actually designed by an ornithologist, which is really cool. And you are just basically trying to attract different birds to your aviary and arrange them in such a way that you get powers from them that build and build and build over the course of the game. And so you start out doing very small actions at the beginning, but by the end, you're actually doing big and kind of powerful, cool chains and combos. And while all of that is cool and all of that is part of the reason why it makes this list, it's also important not to forget that part of the reason that Wingspan is so popular and part of the reason it makes such a good introductory solo game is that Wingspan is not about sci-fi or fantasy, it is about birds. And that's a theme that's going to work for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's not the standard kind of like nerd fare as far as like ancient times, fantasy, sci-fi, like you said. But yeah, it's just about bird watching. The art is styled like a bird watcher's book. I mean, everything about the aesthetic of this is just perfect and spot on. It's so well done from the design of all the components. It's enjoyable to play, just to interact with the pieces and see the cards and everything like that. And it is, I would say, a great entry point into the designer board game world.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with all of that. I mean, the rules are easy to learn and pick up. Not as easy as something like Welcome To, but I think this game manages to be the sort that can bridge the gap between your very first game and kind of a mid-level, like next step kind of game. Very easy to pick up and play. Has an excellent solo mode that's very simple, but where you compete against kind of an AI opponent called an Automa that's very easy to run and manage, but competitive and fun to play against. And just the core mechanics of the game are good. And then, you know, production-wise, top to bottom, this thing is gorgeous. And that's important because the prettier a game is, the nicer the pieces are. I mean, right down to the candy-looking little egg pieces that come in this game. The nicer a game is, the more you're going to want to get it off your shelf and play it when you have other things competing for your attention. Also, bonus, this is a great multiplayer game. It's a very easy game to pull out at a family game night or something. Plays up to 5 players, so it's also just a versatile game to add to your collection.
Yeah, when we actually get to hang out with other people on a regular basis.
Yeah, one day. Well, you know, until that day comes, it's still a great solo game. That's why this game is easily our number 7. That is Wingspan from Stonemaier Games. Our number 6 game on this list is a newer game, actually, from Fantasy Flight Games, based on one of the biggest and, in my opinion, best intellectual properties in existence. This is Marvel Champions.
Did you like this game, Brandon?
I love this game. I love it so much. If you listen to our top 10 solo games, it is my favorite solo game at the moment, and I have played a lot of them. But that is not the only reason that it's on this list. There are a few, actually. Number 1, you can play it with multiple people if you want to.
I still haven't done that yet, have you?
I have played it with 2 players before. I actually prefer it with 1 because it is so much quicker. It does drag on a little bit with 2, but you can play it with more than that. It's a cooperative game. If you are playing with other people, you know, you're just working together to defeat a big bad. That makes it a good fit for solo play. Cooperative games often work pretty well for solo because it's already set up for you as a player to play against the game. So it doesn't need to emulate another player at the table. What's great about this is if you like Marvel, and a lot of people do, this is the marveliest Marvel game.
Yep.
It lets you feel like the heroes that you are playing. You have the option of playing as Spider-Man or Captain America or Black Panther or She-Hulk. You know, they have a really good mix of kind of classic characters and some of the newer favorites that have become popular because of the movies. And playing those characters feels like you're doing the things that those characters are good at.
Right. That's the thing that I really like about this game is it captures the feeling of like each superhero. It's not just like reskinning basically the same set of cards between all the different superheroes. If you're playing as Spider-Man, it feels like the abilities you're using feels like how Spider-Man would fight. If you're doing Iron Man, it's the exact same thing, just like you're building his cool power suit. It's just, it has a lot of great aspects to it.
It does, and it has that ability to make you feel like you're getting stronger and stronger during the course of the game. Mm-hmm. By the time the game is nearing its end, you're about to lose because the villain is about to complete his plot. You come in swinging, maybe at the beginning of the game, you're hitting for 2 or 3 hit points of damage, and you might come at the end of the game and do like 16, 17, and take out half of his health in one go. It builds to a nice big kind of cinematic finish.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of people, a theme that appeals to you is a great entry point. Marvel is the huge franchise, and this is a game that does its IP justice, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I will warn you, this one's a money pit. It can be, I guess I should say. There's a lot of replayability in the box, but if you want more heroes and more villains, they exist, and they're cranking them out at a rate of about one per month at about $12 to $15 a pop.
Yeah.
So you can get into it as much or as little as you like. That's a good thing about the game, right? It's a positive way to spin it.
Yeah, I'm sure they appreciate that.
I bet they do. Who cares what they think? If you want a game that sets up quickly, is full of great superhero action and tough choices for you as a player, but also is easy to set up and quick to play and just fun, then check out our number 6, which is Marvel Champions from Fantasy Flight Games. Our number 5 game is easily one of my biggest surprises from last year, and that is Black Sonata from Side Room Games. This is a game from a tiny little publisher, and it's actually a tiny game from a tiny publisher that knocked me right off my feet because I've always liked deduction games. I've always liked the idea of Clue, for instance, which is the one that almost everybody has experienced at some point. But there are a lot of things about Clue that don't really work. The roll of the dice to see how far you move thing. If one person accidentally doesn't give you the piece of information they need to give you, the game just suddenly breaks.
Right.
There are a lot of things about it that don't work. Now reimagine Clue, but with a more interesting theme for my taste, which we'll get into in just a minute. And instead of rolling dice to figure out how you move and all that nonsense, this is a pure deduction game.
It's so cleverly done for like the solo package for it works so well. I don't know what else to say.
It's a game that's designed for 1 or 2 players. You'll probably never play it with 2.
Yeah, I don't know why. I kind of forget that it can play 2 players.
Yeah, which is a good thing if you're coming at this as a solo player. It feels like it's designed for you. And the theme of it's so good because you're playing as somebody in England in the 1600s trying to find Shakespeare's Dark Lady, which is the lady that Shakespeare wrote many of his sonnets for. But in real life, we don't know who this person is. It's been an enduring mystery for literary scholars for years. And so the theme is you're going to try to find the identity of this lady. And so you've got a couple of possible suspects. Over the course of the game, you're trying to find clues that help you piece together who this person is. And your goal in the game is to try to confront this person and find out once and for all, is this Shakespeare's Dark Lady?
Right. You're moving through London, taking the different paths, trying to hunt them down, try to figure out where they are, cut them off. I've never really played any other game that's like it. It does deduction so well. I would have never thought you could do deduction solo, but this completely pulls it off.
It pulls it off and not only manages to make it workable, it manages to make you feel like a genius when you put all the pieces together. Mm-hmm. And it just is a really satisfying experience. The thing that's great about this game is it comes in a small box. It's cheap. You're supporting a small up-and-coming company. And it feels like an event sort of game, right? Like a lot of these smaller games are what we would call fillers, right? They fill time. They pass the time for you, but they're not a destination. To me, this feels like a destination game just in a small, tight package. And that is one of the best things I could say about a game. Now, one thing I will say is that this game is actually pretty hard to get a hold of because small publishers have a hard time keeping games in stock. But there was recently a Kickstarter campaign for an expansion to this. And you can go on to sideroomgames.com and you can actually late pledge for a copy of just Black Sonata or Black Sonata with the expansion if you want to. And I think that's slated to come out in August of this year. So if you're interested, now is a good time to go ahead and jump in on that. So if you are looking for a cool, puzzly, mystery-solving kind of deduction game in a small package, check out our number 5, Black Sonata from Side Room Games. Our number 4 game on this list is another classic of the industry, and that is Viticulture from Stonemaier Games, which is the same publisher as Wingspan. Viticulture belongs on this list for a couple of reasons. Number 1, it's a worker placement game, which is a style of game where you place a piece on a central board and take the action that's associated with the space where you placed this piece. It's one of the most popular genres of games that exists. But also it's about making wine.
Yeah.
I mean, That's the first thing that hooks a lot of people. Like we said, there are a lot of games out there that are fantasy and sci-fi and all that. But there really are a growing number of games that explore interesting themes. And I've been a home brewer and mead maker for years. So fermentation of any kind fascinates me. And you love wine.
Yeah. Who doesn't?
This is a great game. It has lots of good kind of tense choices. It has a great solo mode that has you playing against a virtual opponent that's really simple to run.
Mm-hmm.
This is another one of those games that it's definitely more rules complex than any of the other ones on this list so far, but it's still not hard to learn.
It's not hard to learn. It's one of those things that you will get better at it the more you play it. I mean, it's got a lot of replayability. And, I mean, it's a great solo game for worker placement. I can't really think of anything else that compares.
No. The thing that makes this, I think, a little easier to learn, even though it's actually a little more complex than some of the other games, is that it's so grounded in its theme. You know how you make wine? You send your workers out to the field to plant grapes and to harvest the grapes and to crush them and put them in the cellar, and the longer they age, the better, right?
Mm-hmm.
It all makes sense together. It's a lovely game. The other benefit to this one being on the list, I think, is I personally don't like to learn a lot of rules, which is unfortunate given that we review games on a pretty regular basis. But if you aren't interested in learning rules for a bunch of different games, but you want to just invest in one game that will grow with you over time, if you buy Viticulture and you play it and you like it, there's an expansion for this called Tuscany that adds so much to the game. I mean, you could get a ton of replayability out of this. In my opinion, this is a great game to invest in over time. If you get it and you don't like it, you haven't wasted a ton of money, right? It's about $50 to $60 to get a copy of this. Not cheap by any stretch, but it's a reasonable price, very much so when you consider what you get in the box. But if you find you like it, you can pay another $30 to get the expansion, which will greatly increase what you get to do. So, outstanding game. One of our favorites.
Absolutely.
That's why our number 4 is Viticulture from Stonemaier Games. Our number 3 game, which is certainly a step up in size and scope, if not necessarily in complexity, is Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition from Fantasy Flight Games. This is one of the most immersive board games I have ever played. I think it belongs on this list because nowadays, Cthulhu is kind of a popular name in the culture. This is a game based on the Cthulhu mythos, which is a series of short stories and novels? I don't know if you would call it a novel. Short and longer stories from H.P. Lovecraft, who's a horror writer from the early 20th century. And, you know, as a human being, Lovecraft was not a great dude. Not exactly a role model, but he was highly influential as a horror author. People like Stephen King have cited him as a major influence for their work because he focuses on cosmic horror. They have these great old malevolent gods that are trying to impinge upon our world and destroy life as we know it. And usually in these stories, there are a team of investigators who are trying to stop that from happening. And that's what this game is about. You take on the role of an investigator, or 2 if you're playing solo, although I think this can be played with up to like 6 people. You should never play with 6. It's an excellent solo game. Anyway, you take on the role of investigators and you go into a mansion or a town or something like that, and you're trying to solve some kind of mystery related to how these gods are trying to break into the world or how a cult is trying to summon them or something like that. What makes this game interesting is that there really aren't that many rules to learn to play the game, but there's a ton of story packed into this.
There's a lot of story, and it's not like an ongoing campaign. They are just completely separate individual stories that you get to play through, and it's definitely worth replaying those in and of themselves. But just the fact that you can mix it up in these different little like scenarios or chapters, they have varying levels of how long they will take and how hard they are to win, because the chances of losing are very real.
Oh man, this is a very difficult game for sure. And it's an expensive game. So those are 2 things to know going in. It's about $80 for a copy of this, but there is nothing else out there like it. This is one of the most thematic game experiences I've ever had. And part of the reason for that is this game actually requires a companion app. And for a lot of people, that's a turnoff. And I get that, especially because a lot of the draw of this hobby is you can get away from the screen. But what the screen adds in this case is atmosphere like crazy. So you are actually moving pieces around a physical board, exploring a house or the area around a house, maybe a town. But when you go to interact with other characters, you don't have to draw a card from some huge deck to interact with these characters. You actually just click on them on the screen and have a conversation with them. And your choices for what you say to them actually have an impact in game, and it's all managed by the app. So the great thing about this is, for a lot of these kind of cooperative games where you're playing against the game, there's a lot of burden on the player to manage how the game reacts to you. The app removes almost all of that in a way that I find really compelling.
Right. It definitely still takes time to like set up and do those things, but not having to worry about shuffling 1,000 different decks. You're not having to worry about that. You have a simple rule set and you just let the app tell you what to do. You hit the scenario you want to do, click go, and it says, find these pieces from the box. And you just assemble those on the table in front of you like it says to, and you're good to go. And the other thing that is cool about this, albeit for an additional fee, they release additional scenarios that you can download through the app. So that way it's like you start with a set amount free, and they've periodically released new ones.
Yeah, I think this game is a good bridge for people who really like video games and want to explore a board game. It takes out a lot of the work that makes board games intimidating and still feels very video gamey. The story that each scenario tells is really compelling, but also the emergent story that happens as you play. Like my first game of this, I managed to break up a cultic ritual just as they were about to summon a giant deity into this manor. They didn't summon the full deity, but they did summon this giant monster that chased me through the house, and I had to escape with the evidence of this ritual. The house is burning down around me, and me, an old woman, limped her way out the door at just the last minute. I mean, it just tells stories that stick with you after you play.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really
every time.
Cool. If you haven't checked out Mansions of Madness, or you like horror, you like story, there's a lot of pieces and it does take a chunk of money to get into, but excellent game. That is our number 3, Mansions of Madness 2nd edition from Fantasy Flight Games. Our number 2 game for this list is Terraforming Mars from Stronghold Games. Now, this marks, I think, a significant step up in complexity.
Absolutely. This is getting into much more complex rules, much more complex systems. This is for people who maybe haven't done board games, but they are ready to dive in because they crave really complex things.
Yes. And for people who aren't scared off by, say, like 8 to 12 pages of rules, it's really not a bad rule set from an experienced game player's perspective. I think if you're not scared off by that number of pages of rules, what you're going to find here is a game that after your first game is really going to click, which is a good feeling to have. Mm-hmm. And it has a theme that is going to draw a lot of people in. You are playing people of Earth who are trying to make Mars a habitable planet, which is an awesome theme for a game.
Right. I mean, it's so cool. It's like a bunch of different corporations that are vying to colonize and to terraform Mars, as the title says. And just the way all of it interplays as far as trying to, add moisture, build up the oceans, build up the atmosphere of oxygen, adding forest, and just the theme of all of these cards, which really drive the game, is so amazing because it's like, well, do you want to try to release geysers, or do you want to try to melt the poles by launching nukes into them? Or do you want to divert a comet water to like crash it into the surface? Like, that is awesome.
Yes. And the thing is, it's scientific in the sense, I think you could call this a speculative science game. Sure. Right? Like, these are real ideas, some of them that have been tossed out about how we might make Mars a habitable place. So if you've ever wondered what it would be like to be Elon Musk, but, not crazy, this is the game that allows you to do that. Now, I will say this is not a pretty game.
I think, naturally block that out.
Yeah, you just have to overcome the look of it. But no kidding. This game is currently number 3 on Board Game Geek. And Board Game Geek, if you're not familiar, is like the website for board games. It has all the games that were ever released. And to be number 3 out of tens of thousands of games is a huge deal. This is a very popular game despite its complexity for a reason. It's that good. And not only as a multiplayer experience, which you can play with like 4 people, I think, but also as a solo game where you're basically trying to make the planet habitable within a certain number of rounds. And if you can do that by the end of the last round, you win, and you kind of tally up a score to see how well you did. And if you can't, then you lose. It's a great challenge with a ton of variability. No 2 games of this will feel the same at all. And if you did want to add some new cards to the pool, there are expansions for this that you can pick up down the road that would add totally new mechanics to the game, as well as a few like smaller expansions that just give you more cards or more special powers for your corporations and all that sort of thing. It's an excellent, excellent game. So if you are interested in this theme, in speculative science, in the solar system and colonizing other planets, and if you like the idea of having a game with a lot of tough, meaty choices and you don't mind to check out the rules a little bit, look at our number 2, which is Terraforming Mars from Stronghold Games. And number 1 on this list, and for sure one of the more complex cooperative games I have ever played, is Spirit Island from Greater Than Games. This is also Carter's number 1 solo game.
Oh, I love this game. It's so good. It's a lot. I mean, there's a lot going on, a lot to consider, but it is such a good game. I love the theme of it. It draws me in. It's great. You are playing these kind of animistic, nature-oriented spirits of this island, and you are helping push back the invaders, these colonizing peoples, England, France, Switzerland. And the thing that is so neat is you are choosing which spirits you're going to do, because there's a bunch that come in the box, and they all play completely differently. They all go about things differently, whether they're just trying to inflict fear into these invaders, or if they're using water to like smash their ships or to flood their towns or whatever. It's really neat. It's so different every time. One of the things I love about it is how well you can scale up the difficulty. When you start playing it at kind of the easiest level, you can beat the game, but it's challenging. It's hard. There's always a chance you're going to lose. And once you feel comfortable with that or it starts getting easier, there's always a way to kind of keep upping up that difficulty. And it's just a really smooth, even gradient that keeps you wanting to sink more time into the game, getting better. And it's just very satisfying for all those reasons.
Yeah. And the thing is, a lot of people are going to say, you're crazy to say that this is an introductory solo game, right? And they would say that probably about a lot of the games on this list, about half of them. But the thing is, I have not put a game on this list that I have not personally experienced working as an entry point into solo games for somebody. I had a friend who's never played solo games before. The most complicated game he'd played was like 7 Wonders. And he played this one time, bought it, and now plays it solo. And it's his first kind of solo game. And the reason it works as a solo, as an entry point, is because the theme is so strong. And because the theme is so compelling. For some reason, one of the downsides to the board game hobby is that we remain fascinated with the era of colonization. I don't know why. We have a habit of making games about European powers that go to places where they shouldn't go and make their homes. Settlers of Catan, perfect example. This game is Catan Fights Back. And that alone is like, way to flip the script on basically like half the board games that come out every year. You really feel like these spirits that you're playing. And you feel godlike almost, especially by the end of the game. There's a great sense of growth in this. It's so much fun to work with the indigenous peoples of the land, which is another cool aspect of this, to either completely destroy the settlers or scare them off your island. Seriously, name me a better theme than that.
It's so good.
It's so good. This is also a game that is excellent solo, is excellent multiplayer, and if you only bought Spirit Island, and this was your solo game, you would get so many plays out of this.
Yeah,
there's
absolutely.
A ton of content in the box. Just a marvelous, marvelous game, and there's a reason it's been just rising through the ranks slowly for these last several years. People just keep discovering it and realizing how awesome it is.
Yeah.
So our number 1 introductory solo game, and again, this is by complexity, not based on how much we love it, although we do love it a lot, is Spirit Island from Greater Than Games. And that's going to wrap up our top 10 introductory solo games list. I hope you find this helpful. You know, if you're new to the board game hobby and you're just not sure where to start, I hope you find something on this list that you like. Don't be afraid to wade into the deeper end of the pool if you feel like one of those themes or the sets of mechanics is going to grab you. The goal here is to find something that sucks you in or that meets the need that you have. If all you need is a light game just to help you pass the time, go for one of those low complexity ones. They're all so good. But if you want something to absorb you, don't be afraid to try out one of the bigger boys. There are plenty of videos online there that can help you to learn the game and really get stuck in with a game that captures your imagination. And if you're somebody who already plays board games, maybe use this list as a guide to help introduce somebody else to the wonderful world of solo board gaming. There's definitely never been a better time to do it. Hey, if you're new to the show, I just want to say a couple of extra things to you. First of all, Thanks for listening. If you like what you hear, go and subscribe to our show, rate us, and review us if you have a chance, and just browse through some of the other episodes. See if there are names of games there that strike your fancy, and go and listen to our reviews. And we've got a couple of other top 10 lists on there. Go and check those out and learn more about the wonderful world of solo games. There's a lot of content that we put up for this show, so check that out. Also, if you want to explore board games from other angles, we are actually part of a broader podcast network called the Dice Tower Network. The Dice Tower is the name of a podcast and YouTube channel that actually helped to get me into board games. Really wonderful bunch of guys there who have put together a huge network of shows that cover board games from every different angle. So if you're looking for other shows on board games, you can go to dicetower.com and find other shows that are part of the Dice Tower Network. Some really, really good stuff out there. Also, if you want to buy a game for yourself, go and check out stonevalleygames.com. They help to sponsor this show. That doesn't mean that we're going to get a monetary kickback for this. It just means that they help us out by sending us board games to review, and we return the favor by telling people what a great store they are. And I would tell you that anyway, honestly, even if they didn't support us, because now that I've shopped there for myself, I can attest it's a really great store. They specialize in solo board games, and they carry a lot of the games on this list. So if you're interested in getting a new game, and especially if you're based in the US, go and check out Stone Valley Games at stonevalleygames.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. I post pretty mediocre pictures of games that we get in for review or games that I'm testing and prepping for an upcoming episode, so you can check that out. Our Instagram handle is @Solosaurus Podcast. And if you have any questions or comments about the show, you can also email us. We're happy to chat with you. You can email us at solosauruspodcast@gmail.com. All right, folks, that's going to do us for this episode. We do put out a new episode every other Friday, so come back and join us soon. Until next time, though, my name is Brandon Waite.
And I'm Carter Mackey.
And this is Solosaurus.